Hey everyone, this is just a review of perspectives and what we are going to focus on as we are looking at our partner's IRR tonight. So, perspectives. Okay, to review perspectives, and again, all these terms that we see either in the rubric or in our instructions for AP Seminar can be found in the course and exam description that you'll have linked in Cool Links. But a perspective is a point of view conveyed through an argument. So, again, perspective, just it's an argument, right? So in your paper, you want to explore different perspectives. You can't just explore one. You have to explore through different ones. So here's an example, a student examples paper with the topic opening public schools during COVID, and they decided to stick with the economic lens. And here are the three different perspectives that they decided to choose from. So we have the first one, and it's comparing working parents and stay at home parents and then their involvement in their child's schooling. Okay, so that's the first perspective they go through. The second perspective is the single parents household and their reliance on public school daycare. So that was the second perspective they explored. And then the last one that they went ahead and researched was the cost of living and its gradual rise over the last 20 years. So these are the three different sections, perspectives, and it's sectioned in their paper, right? And they explored this in their IRR. Here's another example. This student, right, example student, chose juvenile incarceration and they decided to use the psychological and social lens. And so these were the two different perspectives they chose: impact of incarceration and mental health. And then the second perspective is impact of incarceration and crime rates in adulthood. Okay. So again, we have these two different perspectives. We want to make sure we do more than one, and that's what this student did here, right? They didn't just look at incarceration and its effect on mental health and then build an argument or anything like that, right? They looked at what's the evidence say about incarceration, mental health, and then also here's the next section: the impact of incarceration and continued crime rates once these juveniles turn past 18, past 19, 21, and on. So these are the things to remember when you're considering the perspectives for your IRR. Okay, so this is what you'll be spending your class time doing. You only want to have 2 to 3 perspectives. You only want to have 2 to 3 perspectives. Why? First reason is you want to explore more than one because the graders are looking that you looked at this particular topic in a different way, okay, at least 2 different ways. You don't want to do more than 3 because after watching videos of AP seminar graders, they've admitted students struggle to write a strong paper that really goes in depth on what the perspective is if they do more than 3, because again, you only have 1,200 words. So you want to make sure you use your words wisely. And if you go into 4 perspectives or 5 perspectives, you're not spending more than 100 words per perspective. And that doesn't give you a whole lot of room for everything that you need to include. So what are the things you need to include? Well, before you go into your perspective, another thing I want to note, this goes after your context, right? Your context is like your introductory paragraph, right? You're establishing your evidence, right? You're establishing your context. You're going right into the issue, but the context is specifically telling us why we care about the question that you're researching. Why does this issue matter? And again, you're still presenting evidence that's from reputable sources, academic journals, and everything like that. But your perspectives show up after the context, which is your first paragraph. Now, your perspective, again, going back to that word count limitation, you don't want, this is just a range, a suggestion, but just to give you an idea of, how in depth you want to go. So 350 to 500 words on per perspective, right? If you're doing 2 perspectives, you're going to write more per perspective. If you're doing 3 perspectives, right, you'll write a little bit less. But that's just something to keep in mind as you're paying attention to that 1,200 word limit. You also want to integrate evidence from different sources to go and develop your perspectives. So when you're thinking about, you're using academic journals, reputable organizations, different experts, you want to make sure you're not sticking to just one field. So when you look at your sources within the perspective, you want to make sure that you're not just quoting only one expert during that entire perspective, right? Or you want to make sure that you're not just using the Journal of Medicine, right? You want to make sure that you're bringing a varied varied sources of, different pieces of evidence. And so that can come from, a medical journal, and maybe also a philosopher, and then, again, do it in what makes sense for your paper and for the perspective, but make sure you're just bringing in varied sources. So another thing to remember is that perspectives are not lenses. Lenses can help you find perspectives. So your lenses, right, it helps you kind of focus in, but the perspective really narrows in on one thing. So a lens, right, would be psychological, the psychological lens. But there is a lot that comes with psychology. And so narrowing it down to one perspective, which would be the impact of incarceration and mental health, right? You can even change that mental health and be more specific and say the impact of incarceration and depression, or the impact of incarceration and schizophrenia, right? So narrowing it down helps us get our perspective and not be broad with just a lens. So the next thing, perspective is another word for argument, but this does not have to be your argument, right? As you're reading through different sources and you're synthesizing the information together, that doesn't mean that you're presenting a solution for the problem, right? You're not saying one is better than the other. You are just reading through the evidence and compiling it together into the perspectives, right? And so that is something to remember. Your IRR does not have to be argumentative. It can be informational. And that's the nice thing about this paper, is that, again, you don't have to make any counter arguments or anything like that, because you're not really trying to persuade the audience to do something or to take up something or provide that one thing is a better solution than the other. You're just saying, hey, this is how it is. Now, can you write an argument? Absolutely, you totally can. But the nice thing is you don't have to. So if you end up not writing an argument, you're not going to get docked any points. And the last thing kind of relates to the what I just said, but the perspectives you present, they're not in competition with each other. They don't always counter each other. Now, when you move to your IWA, you will have to present at least one perspective, right, that works as the counter argument for your overall argument. But in this paper overall, that doesn't necessarily have to happen. It may happen, but it doesn't have to happen. So what you want to focus on is how can you link these together. So let me show you an example of how we could link our three perspectives within a paper. Okay, so this is pulling from the example of the first student paper, the fictional student who is looking through the economic lens, opening schools during COVID. Okay, so these were the three perspectives they decided to explore. We have parental involvement in academic success. And so these were the 2 to 3 sentences they wrote to connect to their next, to set up, what they're talking about. A student's greatest predictor of success in school is based on the parents' involvement. If no guardian is involved in the student's education due to being overworked, neglect, or absence, the child's development will be stunted. Okay, so then they would spend that perspective, right, that section of that paper, talking through and providing evidence that shows how important, how vital parents' involvement is in student success. Okay, so then they would do that. And then we would go ahead and link to our next perspective, which was the increase of cost of living. And this is where the student would rate this. American parents find less time to invest in their child's schooling. Okay, again, that's a nod to the previous section. Due to the increase of financial demands, the cost of living requires many parents to take multiple jobs in order to provide for their family's basic needs. Okay, so in this next perspective, the student would go ahead and explore the gradual rise of cost of living, right, providing evidence and taking sample evidence of different cultures and populations, and how more parents are working more hours and more jobs compared to where they were 20 years ago. Okay. And then we would go ahead and link to our next perspective, which would be the impact of public school / daycare. And this student would link it writing this. Public school programs have been created to accommodate specific households and children who need extra support. Parents benefit from the free access to these programs, so the cost could be spent on other necessities. Okay, so then again, linking through how cost of living has made it more difficult for parents, and how parents rely on daycare and these programs provided by public schools, so that parents can go ahead and help their children with all the basic needs they have. Okay, so those are examples of links. And honestly, your links, that is going to, between your perspectives, that's what is going to be one of the things that takes a paper from being a middle of the road paper to a high scoring paper. So taking it from that 4 column to a 6 column. So tonight for the IRR. So in class, you should have swapped IRRs with another student. You shared links and they emailed to each other, and you gave each other commenting access. So you want to read your partner's IRR. If you were absent, consult your team, ask them whose paper you need to read, and on and on. But after you've read your partner's IRR, go ahead and highlight the 2 to 3 sections in their paper. With each highlight per section, go ahead and comment the title or what you would think that perspective is. Okay. So an example, right? You would just write the impact of COVID and mental health, right? You just write it in your own words. Don't be freaked out if it doesn't match. The big thing is, was the author's writing clear enough that you yourself could say, oh yeah, no, I could see what the perspective or what they're driving at here. If the perspective for a section is unclear, go ahead and write that. I cannot give you guys individual feedback anymore, but you guys can give feedback to each other. So if it's not clear to you, make sure you write that, and then you can talk to the author about why it was unclear, and then give them some tidbits on how they can improve, or what they need to remember to include so it's more clear. If they have more than 3 perspectives, comment, focus on the previous 3 established, or integrate this section with them, right? So telling them like, hey, you've already established 3, or, the first perspective, didn't make much sense, so maybe include this one instead. Again, read through their paper and provide the best quality feedback that you can, right, of what makes sense. So it's great if they can integrate it, but if it doesn't make sense, or if it doesn't fit, or it's just all over the board, you need to make sure that you comment so that they can improve their paper. All right, that's all you need to do. Read their paper, highlight the 2 to 3 perspectives, label them with what you think those perspectives are supposed to be. If they're unclear, make sure to write unclear. And if there's more than 3, make sure you let them know so they can narrow down their paper. All right, thanks for watching.